I'm Alex Vanek. I'm the State Service Plan Coordinator for Serve Virginia. So the work I do is mostly focused on our community partnerships and really the ways that we can connect AmeriCorps and the whole volunteerism sector in Virginia together, make sure everyone is getting the resources they need, understanding different needs, and how we can kind of plug in and support people and get them in touch with each other. So you heard a little bit earlier today from Kathy and Annalise already about what our state service plan is and what its purpose is. So it's something we're required to do every 3 years by AmeriCorps to have kind of some strategies laid out for how we're going to support AmeriCorps, how we're going to support volunteerism, and how we're going to connect those. So what I'm going to go over here is a couple of the different projects that in the last year and a half we've put our effort towards, what some of the outcomes are, and how you all can benefit from them or, get involved with some of these efforts more. So Kathy mentioned this earlier, but here they are on a slide. These are the three strategies that we have as part of our state service plan that a lot of our different goals and objectives are broken down into. So our first strategy is building a stronger culture of service, volunteerism, and civic engagement. So breaking those pieces apart, a lot of that is how do we change the culture of Virginia? How do we get more people excited about volunteering and AmeriCorps? How do we get more of that information out there? So there's a larger amount of knowledge, just general awareness. Next is building a more representative, integrated, and aligned network of partners. And this is a lot of our relationship building with other nonprofits, with funders, with corporations, all of whom are really interested in volunteering in different ways, but don't always necessarily have the understanding of the best way to do that or how to connect with each other. And so in that strategy, you'll see a lot of the projects that we're working on to connect those groups with each other. And last is to build a more robust resource and support infrastructure. So when we talk about that, we're looking about a lot of more concrete things like if you need training, where do you go to? If there isn't training offered for something, how can we make sure that people can find it? And Annalise touched earlier on how a lot of those things can be found on our new website. And what I'm going to do a little bit at the end of this, once we get to that portion, is actually just show you the new website and walk through a couple of these places so that you can see the links and the path that you need to follow to get there. But all of this really does tie up together for both AmeriCorps and for volunteerism in general. And any of the projects on here that you look at and you say, hey, that's interesting, is certainly something you are all already invited to be a part of. You just need to let us know, and we'll be happy to share more information. So the first strategy we're going to go into here is about this culture piece. How do we get more Virginians to understand volunteerism, to understand national service and its benefits, and answer a lot of the unanswered questions about volunteering in Virginia in general. So the big project from this piece that we've been undertaking in the past year and a half has been the Virginia Community Engagement Index. And I'll touch on that first. The second piece has been refreshing, updating, standardizing, and just doing all of our volunteer recognition processes and awards better than we have in the past. And the last piece that we've just getting started up recently, actually, has been some more efforts around connecting AmeriCorps alumni in Virginia, whether they served in Virginia and have moved out of the state since then, or whether they served elsewhere and are now living in Virginia. We really want that to be a thriving network of people who are still engaged with AmeriCorps and understand where their local programs are and how they can help them and still be involved with community service. So the first bit I'm going to start talking about here is our Community Engagement Index. The questions this was looking to answer was, how are Virginians engaged in their communities and why? Why are people volunteering? What gets them motivated? Who are they? And then how can we do a better job reaching out to them and inviting them? If you remember from earlier, Annalise mentioned that invitation piece is really key to getting people to come serve. And we want to understand what is motivating people. What is it that we can tell them, hey, this is why you should come volunteer. This is why you should serve with AmeriCorps. That will really inspire them to act. That will really inspire them to take that step to find their local volunteer center and sign up for an opportunity, or to find an AmeriCorps program and commit to a year of service. So we wanted this to be something that everyone across the state was engaged in. We wanted it to really be a team that had a diverse number of perspectives from different backgrounds. And so we pulled from the government, which is us as well in the state, We pulled from funders, elected officials, youth organizations, civic organizations, other nonprofits, faith organizations, higher education, and had this whole group in a room together coming up with both the survey questions we wanted to ask, and then once we got the data back, looking over the analysis and deciding what some of the most important pieces were in that. We also aligned this with a couple of other national surveys that look at civic engagement, especially looking at whether that's voting rates or just people, how often they're involved in, signing things like petitions, reaching out to their elected officials, but also smaller things just like helping their neighbors, volunteering. That whole spectrum we wanted to be able to capture. And so we looked at a couple other tools. If any of you are familiar with the Civic Health Index by the National Conference on Citizenship, that inspired a lot of this project, but we wanted to make something that was more unique to Virginia, something that Virginia communities, Virginia organizations can look at and say, okay, this will help us understand the community immediately around us. To that end, we put a number of goals in place with the help of this group and the leadership of other organizations that are doing research in this sector. And you can see just some of those major questions here, which I've already walked through some of those. How are Virginians engaging? What are the tangible ways we can strengthen communities? What are the weaknesses? What are the strengths? How do we get more people out there? How do we get them excited to make a difference? And then, of course, how do we actually track the effectiveness of all of these actions? How do we track that we're actually mobilizing more Virginians and that they are having a positive impact on the communities they live in? Now, this was a very successful survey. Our original hope was to have around 3,000 or so people take this. And between our panel and then the outreach that our partner organizations did, we ended up with over 6,000 people taking the survey, giving us our very large sample of Virginians, and especially for a lot of the statistical analysis. This allows us to really get into the weeds and do some exact measurements to weigh categories and use this as a sample that reflects a lot of different viewpoints, not just a handful of Virginians who are more engaged than others, but really looking across all of the Virginians who had the chance to take the survey. Now, one of the questions that I want to go over first here is state and local priorities. Now, as I get into this and start talking about some of the data, the distinction I want to draw with this particular study is that this is not a community needs assessment in the traditional way where you would look at poverty rates, you would look at food insecurity, you would look at the rates of unhoused individuals, housing prices, and all those kind of fluctuations in a community and determine, okay, this is, 50% of our population needs this. That's not what this study gives us. This is about what people perceive to be their top needs. This is about when I ask you, hey, what's most important in your community? And they'll answer and say one of these topics. Now, why that's important is because there might be gaps in there. Let's say housing is a really big issue, but people don't think it is. There needs to be some more messaging around that. Same with education or any of these. It matters that people know what the issues are because that's how we're going to actually be able to connect them with them, to donate their time, to donate their money, to support all of the missions that many of you are doing right now towards addressing those community needs. So with that, what I want to share first off is this comparison of statewide and local priorities. So across both, people answered that education, health and well-being, and housing were the top 3 priorities. Now, within each of these, there is a breakdown of smaller subtopics that are much more specific. Within health, there's a variety of, physical activity, food access, all of those things are included under there. And we are working on getting our final report out. Right now, it's in the draft phase. And once we've got that data out in that full report, there'll be a lot more of that specific information that you can look into, which will be a lot more helpful community by community. And for you all, really help you kind of direct your attention and your community's attention towards the needs that you're addressing to say, hey, this is a top priority, and this is something we're working on, and really line up with that. So the main differences between these two, the environment was a slightly higher priority on the local level than on the statewide level. So people were slightly more likely to say that that was a higher priority for them. And then you can see that housing was also something that there was a slight increase in people who said it was a higher priority on the local level. On the statewide level, people were a little bit more likely to say that civil and human rights was a top priority. And on the local level, that was a slightly lower category. Oh, and I should say, feel free if any of you have questions, put them in the chat, hop in. Where I'm gonna, for this first part, go over a lot of information, and then we'll get into some more interesting and fun and interactive stuff. But if any of this is interesting or you want clarification, I'm happy to answer that. So feel free to just pop in and interrupt me. So the next piece that I touched on is we really want to have benchmarks. We want to have a way to say, did our efforts actually go towards changing the amount of engagement that Virginians are having, whether that's in civics, whether that's just volunteering, or whether that's just being a good neighbor, just assisting the people around them. All of those things we want to include in this kind of broad definition of what it means to serve Virginia. And we want that to be part of our mission and something that we actually measure and hold ourselves accountable to. So here's a sampling of just a handful of the different benchmarks. There's a million data points we can pull out of this study, but these are some of the ones that we think are the most relevant for the work that we're doing right now and the work that we can change in the future through our efforts. So under civic action, we have some measurements here on attending public meetings, sharing content on social media, and discussing issues. This Neighbors Helping Neighbors category is more about informal volunteering. So just acts of service where people are, babysitting for their neighbors, walking their dogs, bringing in the mail when they're out of town, all the things like that. We want people to, in a healthy community, people are able to turn to their neighbors and ask for that kind of assistance. And we want to recognize that as something that's important. So over half of Virginians were engaged in this more than once a month. So people assisting each other in small ways. And 76% of people said they spent time with people of differing cultural backgrounds more than once a month. So again, this is about having that diverse community of people interacting with each other. 19% of Virginians don't realize at first that the ways they help out in their communities is volunteerism and service. And that 19% are the people we want to reach, and we want to really empower them to say, hey, what you're doing matters. What you're doing is, is not just a good deed, but something that's actually really integral to your community, and really matters. Under this formal volunteering category is where we get the more traditional, I signed up and I went to the food bank for 2 hours kind of people and those activities. So 59% of Virginians said they had formally volunteered with an organization in the past 12 months. And I want to note, when you look at these numbers, this isn't necessarily census level data, where you'd see it's around 24% of Virginians, based on the census, who had said reported that they volunteered. The group that we reached out to for this are people who either had already agreed to be on a panel that took this survey. So they're a little bit more likely to also volunteer, be active in the community. And then the other group are people who are connected with our network of nonprofit organizations already. So that's another group that's a little bit more likely than your average Virginian to be volunteering, to be engaged, to be donating their time and money, because they're already aware of these issues. They're already connected with that organization. So take this as really a measurement of, these are what active Virginians are saying. These are what active Virginians are doing. And we need to do more to reach the rest of Virginians as well. But these are the people who are kind of already a little in touch with the work and with what the needs in their community are. 70, and I believe Annalise cited this earlier as well, but 79% of volunteers have either maintained or increased their frequency of volunteering. So we know during COVID, there was a huge drop in the amount of volunteerism pretty much everywhere. And this is something we're trying to see recover, and we're trying to see it get back up to where it was before the pandemic. And this measurement at least shows that our active Virginians are slowly working towards that they are getting back in their communities. They are starting to volunteer more. And next up here. So among this group, one of the things we also asked was, what do you feel is effective? What do you feel is going to actually make a difference? And we asked this by issue. And what this summary here shows is that for almost every topic, people picked community education and outreach and political action, policy change, and lawmaking as the two areas where that is going to make a difference in whatever community need. So people perceive at least, that if I'm active, civically, if I'm active in talking about issues and discussing and promoting things to my community, that's going to make a difference. Now, volunteerism obviously is something that's tied up in all of these. The people out canvassing for a political campaign are going to be volunteers. The people who are doing community outreach, who are tabling for an organization and talking about the local food pantry, are going to be volunteers as well. So all of those they're all really linked, but what this is important for showing is that these are the actions that people at least perceive as being able to make a real difference. Now, I don't have a slide on it here, but one of the points for data that we have as well is people, despite saying that they think political action is very important, also responded that they aren't very civically active. If we go back a couple slides here to our civic action, only 23% of Virginians attended a public meeting to discuss a local issue. So they think that it's really important to be doing those kind of things, but they're not actually participating in that way in large numbers. And a large reason for that is because of trust. One of the questions we asked here is, and the specific question for this is, how much do you trust these organizations to do what is right? So there's a little bit of a, people have to interpret that answer for themselves a bit. But what we can interpret this as is these are the organizations that people taking the survey trusted. If they were going to dedicate their time to reaching out, interacting with these organizations, they think something would come of it that is beneficial to them and to their community and would go towards the things they want to see change. Now, nonprofit organizations were the most trusted of all of the groups in this survey, at 64% of respondents saying they trust or trust fully that nonprofit organizations will do the right thing. On the flip side, you can see government organizations at 31% towards the bottom, with only national media and corporations lower. And up there with nonprofit organizations, you have local business and educational institutions as well. So the institutions, the organizations that people trust in their community to actually go to for making change are their nonprofits, their local businesses, and the educational institutions. They think that if they reach out to them, they'll be receptive, they'll hear their ideas, and that if they support those groups, they're likely to actually make the change that they want and go in the direction that they believe the community should be going in. Now, this is important for that civic action part because this can explain a little bit of why people, despite thinking that it's important to be participating in the political process, aren't actually doing it. It's because they don't think that it will actually have a real effect, even if they do. So what we want to use this to show, especially for nonprofit organizations, is the value that nonprofits have for hearing people's opinions, for being there as kind of the front line to receive what people are asking for, what people's needs are, what people want to see change. And that us at the state level, we want to really be more open to hearing what the needs nonprofits are getting from community members are, because we know that that's going to be an organization that they trust to share their opinions with. And so we want to develop stronger partnerships, healthier partnerships, to really make sure that the needs that people are asking for at the community and the local level are reaching us at the state level, and that we can get a better understanding of what they want. So this is just a smaller breakdown of how trust manifests locally. And what this is on here to note, if you can see the couple of questions at the bottom, is it's comparing what kind of organizations people volunteered with the kind of organizations they trust. And there's a pretty strong correlation there where people volunteer, those are also the organizations they trust, and vice versa. If people think that an organization is going to have an impact, they're willing to commit their time to it. And as they understand the impact and the importance of an organization's mission, they're also more willing to give that time. And so it's both an educational experience and also a way to inspire them to act more. So this is the piece that I mentioned a little bit earlier that we really want to distill out of all of this, and that we'll get, as we get the report out and get the data cleaned up, we'll have some very detailed topic by topic ways to show this. Is why do people start volunteering? And then on the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about why do they continue volunteering. A big part of why they start is an invitation to join, whether it's through their house of worship or spirituality, or whether it's through school. That kind of organized invitation where someone else says, or an organization says, hey, we're going to go do this. And it's a broad invitation for anyone to come participate in that. That's one of the big reasons. Another one is a moving experience. Someone was helped and they wanted to pay it forward. They wanted to help others, or they witnessed something firsthand and decided they needed to act. And that can be firsthand, or in this inspiration case, they didn't see it firsthand, but they learned about it. They heard about it in the news, learned about it in school, and decided to take action. Now, being required to join is not as strong of a motivator, we found. So whether that's for job applications, requirements, those are all motivators in some people. That's why they get started. But by far the biggest category, the biggest reason that people get started with volunteering is that invitation or through the personal experience. Now, the question then is, once they get started, what keeps them there? What retains our volunteers? What retains our AmeriCorps members? Why is it that people will commit to doing this for a year, for their lives? And this survey captured a little bit of that. Now, the most, sorry, let me drink some water here for a moment. That's what I get for talking for 20 minutes nonstop. The biggest reason why people continue volunteering is this feeling of appreciation, this feeling of being fulfilled, knowing that they're making a difference and that they're making a change. And in all three of these top categories here, whether it's knowing they have experience and skills, making connections and staying active, all of these have a lot of kind of personal impacts and really highlights the personal impact of volunteering for someone. And then lower down here, this next section is some of those deep-seated beliefs, lived experiences, people seeing that, I have no choice but to act. This is something I need to do for my community. Now, what's really important about this first section here and how we can use this data, and I would encourage all of you to interact with it, is this piece about people feeling fulfilled, this piece about people wanting to use their skills is something that having better volunteer management, having better systems and programs which utilize volunteers, it shows how valuable that is. It shows how valuable an AmeriCorps program, which is dedicated to providing a strong experience for the AmeriCorps members, giving them the resources and the empowerment to pursue this kind of service work for a whole year or more. There's a lot of value in that because it's giving back to them while they're serving. It's letting them use and develop their skills. It's helping them be part of a larger movement and connect with other people. It really meets all of those three top categories. And so that's something I'd encourage you to, take away from this is this is why AmeriCorps is important. This is why volunteer management and volunteer programs are important as well, is because when you put those resources towards it, that's really what keeps people coming back. That's what keeps them engaged, is knowing that what they're doing is part of something bigger, knowing that they're getting self-fulfillment, knowing that they're using their skills. And I want to touch a little bit after going through all of that on just how to use all of this, what to take away from this. Like I said, full report is coming. And then after that, we're hoping to really build out a dashboard where you can break down, I want to know for health and wellness through this subcategory about healthcare and health access. How do I motivate volunteers to do that? We have data points like that. It's just going to take a while to sort it all and really get it into a format where people can get through that and find what they need. But that's coming. And that's a tool which we think will be really helpful for specific programs for developing your approach and your strategies, especially when it comes to recruitment. Now, here are some things that we're doing right now in the meantime. Our first big effort is taking this statewide data and starting to use it on the regional levels. So right now we're working with a team in the Virginia Central region, led by the Community Foundation for Greater Richmond and SIR, the research contractor that we worked with for a lot of this, to take all of this data and say, okay, what strategies can we put this into in our local community? How can we take this and actually make a plan around it for better volunteerism in Central Virginia? So kind of the greater Richmond area is what we're looking at right now. And we're hoping to do that not just in Richmond, but really all around Virginia in communities where we can grow, where we can get people together and gather them. And you are all more than invited to be a part of these teams as they're getting started up. It's something that we'll make an effort to get out to you all and keep your program officers informed on when those opportunities and when those meetings are, because we want your voices to be in the room, especially as programs that are committed to national service. Because we want to be able to show people that that is a solution, that this is one of the things that can really help to support volunteerism in your community and really inspire people to act and make a difference. The next part here is connecting the data with AmeriCorps programming. I went into that a little bit, where we hope these data points will be something that can help you when you're writing grants, when you're evaluating, to say, okay, we can see that people perceive this issue in this matter, and this is why people care about it. This is why people serve. This is why people are engaged with this. Or if people are less aware, it can be a good measure to know if you need to change, if you need to do something differently, if you need to present information in a different way to different groups of people. That's all information that we're going to want to get to you all so that you can use it in your work. And this last part is establishing benchmarks for success in community engagement. So I went through some of those preliminary example benchmarks earlier. The hope here is that we'll do this survey again, that we'll collect this data again in 2 or 3 years and be able to compare our progress, to compare and see, did the outreach we do, did the policy work, and all of the grassroots organizing actually lead to higher volunteerism rates, more interest in national service, more AmeriCorps members, more AmeriCorps programs. Those are the kind of goals that we want to set for the future and that we want to be able to measure again. So I'm going to pause here for a moment before I go on to the next section, and just open it up to any questions about the Virginia Community Engagement Index and this project. It's something that's very much still ongoing, and there'll be more information, but if there are questions you have now, I'm happy to answer any of those. All right, seeing none. Again, feel free to put things in the chat if something comes to mind, and I'll always follow back around to it. So the next part of our first strategy here, this is some of the more exciting stuff, or not some of the, I guess, not exciting. This is some of the stuff that it's been a little bit easier to get a fast start on because we already had programs in place. And it's stuff that can be very immediately relevant for a lot of our programs and our volunteers in the state. And that's our volunteer recognition. So at Serve Virginia, we have 3 recognition strategies, 3 recognition awards that we give out. The first one is the Virginia National Service Awards. This is the one that's going to be tied most directly to you all and your programs. So this is an annual award where we select 4 AmeriCorps members of the year from across the different streams of service. So AmeriCorps State, Vista, seniors, and alumni are the ones we recognize. We don't have NCCC on here. We haven't in the past. We may consider getting it on there next year if we can make the connections with that group and get a strong group of nominated members. But this award ceremony, the nominations open in February, and we encourage every AmeriCorps program to nominate at least 1 or 2 members for this. Pick the 2 members who you think have had the most impact. And if you want to nominate more, please do. This is open for them. This is their chance at recognition that's specific to AmeriCorps members serving in Virginia. And we do recognize these winners at our Virginia Volunteerism Summit, which happens in May, statewide conference. And having the award ceremony there is a really great way to showcase your AmeriCorps programs and our AmeriCorps members to the larger community of nonprofits and volunteer engaged organizations in the state, because it lets us kind of show off and say, hey, look, this is the great work these few AmeriCorps members are doing, and there's hundreds of them. And so we really encourage you all to be aware of that. Again, this is information we'll communicate with you all at the time once it's most relevant, but just something to be aware of that our office manages. The next program that we do is the Governor's Volunteerism Community Service Awards. So this is something that is, signed off on by the governor's office, and our office is in charge of handling. So nominations for this open in April, and we score 10 different categories that awards are given out to, and these are recognized at the governor's mansion in the fall. So AmeriCorps members themselves aren't eligible for this, but for those of you who engage volunteers outside of your AmeriCorps program or work with other nonprofits and community organizations, small businesses, this is a really great chance to recognize everyone who's engaged in that work. Not just the volunteers. So I would encourage all of you to keep this in mind. We closed it for this year already, but again, coming around next year, this will be something we talk about and really encourage you all to nominate organizations that you work with that support your work for recognition in this. And then the last award ceremony that we did is something we started this year, which is the Serve Virginia Honor Roll. So this was something we worked on with a group of partners as a way to increase the amount of volunteer recognition awards available in Virginia without requiring people to fill out more nomination forms. We're requiring people to go through any other processes. So the way this works, this is announced annually, and we take qualified candidates from the pools of honorees and nominees from award ceremonies across Virginia. So we give our partners a little bit of freedom to say, hey, this nominee didn't win the award because we can only give one, but is a really, really great example of volunteerism and community service, and we want them to be recognized. And that's what this honor roll lets us do. It lets us recognize all of those other partner organizations and volunteers who otherwise might not be seen and really give them the appreciation that we think they deserve. So we accept these on a rolling basis throughout the year, ending in December, and then we announce it for the past year in January to capture all of those great volunteers. So any questions about these awards? Again, a lot of this information, we're past the cycles for this year, so it'll be more relevant at the beginning of next year, but want to give you all a heads up about what we do. Great. Moving on then, talking a little bit about AmeriCorps alumni. And this is something we are very excited to be getting up and running for the first time in a while. There used to be a couple of different AmeriCorps alumni groups in Virginia that were kind of loosely organized by individuals. And as far as we can tell, none of those are active anymore. So we're making an effort to get those groups back connected with each other at the state level, and then also spreading down to the local level so that AmeriCorps members, after they leave their term of service, don't lose that community that they were part of. And really building those pathways for them to stay connected and also to gain personal, professional experience and those benefits after their service. So we launched a LinkedIn group, which is currently active and expanding. And we're mostly going to use that to share statewide information. So things that are going to be relevant for all the AmeriCorps members in the state, whether that's about, recruiting to help get that word out to their individual networks, or if we're having different events, making sure our AmeriCorps alumni know about them, that they're invited to attend. And also, thanks, Annalise, for the shout out there. And also providing different training opportunities and professional experiences that can help them grow. So partially through this LinkedIn group and our communications, we're also going to be working on just pulling interest in what people want to do, how they want to get involved. Whether that's in-person volunteer activities is something, we would know some, though a lot, though not all of our AmeriCorps alumni might be interested in continuing to volunteer a little bit alongside others. And also finding some just other opportunities for smaller local and regional gatherings with AmeriCorps alumni who are in your area. Professional development, as I mentioned, is going to be a priority based on the feedback we've received so far, is making sure our alumni can attend workshops and training events that are relevant for the current work that they're doing. There's a lot of free workshops out there provided by organizations in Virginia, by national organizations, and sometimes it's just a matter of directing people to the right ones. And so we're hoping that's something we can provide as well. The last piece here is about advocacy work. Now, this is really where alumni can be crucial to the work of promoting AmeriCorps. Our programs in our office don't always have the capacity to, be going out and doing a lot of the grassroots advocacy work, calling elected officials on their own. But it's something that a strong network of AmeriCorps alumni, of people who understand the program and are invested in its success, can really be great ambassadors for, and representing just how important AmeriCorps was to them and the communities that they served in. So as we look to do things like, for example, making the Siegel Education Award tax exempt in Virginia, providing better avenues for Virginia AmeriCorps alumni to get into Virginia public universities, those things that need to happen, a lot of that just has to happen on the legislative side. And it's something where it would be really valuable to have AmeriCorps alumni, using their voices and kind of coming together to try to make a difference in that way. So any questions about our AmeriCorps alumni strategy or suggestions? I know a number of you are AmeriCorps alumni yourselves. And so any feedback and ideas you have is always more than welcome during this process. All righty. So That's strategy one. Thanks for hanging in there. These next two are a little bit faster. That one has a lot of the VCEI, and some of these awards are very like meaty ongoing projects that we've put a lot of resources to these last years, and we're excited to see them going in new directions, and really gathering a lot of energy. And like I said, we want you all to be part of that, to understand this work, because ultimately, this is something that we hope is going to boost up the presence of AmeriCorps, and really make it so that Virginians feel inspired, and that it's kind of almost a standard part of the Virginia culture to be volunteering, to be considering AmeriCorps not as, a backup option, but as a, hey, I just finished high school, I'm going to take a gap year to do AmeriCorps, or I just finished college, AmeriCorps is my next step. We want that to be what people are thinking about, and we're taking the steps towards that. So this next piece on building our network up. So none of this work happens in a vacuum. There's nothing that we do that isn't going to be better if we engage more people, if we get more people on board, if we can build consensus and collaborate. Anything that we try to do is just going to go so much further and benefit more people if we're working with people on the local level, if we're working with other community organizations. So what I want to share with you all today is some of those key networks of organizations that we regularly work with, so that you're aware of the resources they provide. And essentially, as I'll show on this next slide here, that our network is your network. Anyone that we're connected with is a resource that we are happy to connect you with as well, that we encourage you all to connect with, because we have strong working relationships already. And it's really easy to make introductions. It's really easy to, help align our priorities. Essentially, these are the groups where we're all on the same team here. Even if there's not a connection already, it's something that can easily be created and sustained through our office. So the first group that I want to talk about is the Volunteer Center Network. So I don't know if there's a raised hand. So I don't know if you want show of hands, nods, little yeses in the chat, if anyone here knows who their local volunteer center is, if they can name them. I'll pause for a moment to let people think about that one. Great, you're all starting from the same point then, is what I'm hearing here. So volunteer centers are nonprofit organizations, which sometimes they're housed in local government organizations, or other nonprofits, but essentially they provide an online volunteer platform or some kind of call center if they don't have one, which lets nonprofits looking for volunteers and volunteers looking for opportunities to serve connect with each other. So if you wanted to get signed up to serve on a weekend, you would look at this online website, find the opportunities listed there by the nonprofits who are on it, and you'd be able to sign up for one of them. That's the basic structure of how these work. They do a lot of a number of them offer trainings for volunteer management, and other ways that they support volunteers in specific programs, especially on youth volunteering. All of those programs are part of the Volunteer Center Network. And yep, I see the folks from down in Dan River know theirs with 365 through the Dan River Nonprofit Network. They do great. They're doing great work. They're expanding a lot. Definitely one of the bigger growing success stories from this group of organizations. So one thing that I would encourage all of you to do. Yep, you got it. Volunteer Hampton Roads. That's what covers down in that area. So I would encourage all of you to actually, if you aren't connected with your volunteer center, and I promise I will pull up once I get to the next part, where on our webpage you can find all of your volunteer centers in the regions. So don't worry, this isn't going to be like a treasure hunt where I send you going off to find them yourselves. I do have this information. I'm just dangling out in front of you. So what I would encourage all of you to do is actually connect with your volunteer center and use that as a place to list AmeriCorps positions. Now, I would include, the full description, make sure that people know that it's a paid position, work with the volunteer center staff to understand if they have any different ways they want to list that. But looking at the Points of Light national website, there is actually a checkbox in their sorting filters for AmeriCorps programs. So there's no reason for a lot of these local organizations that are part of that network not to be willing to list it in the same way. Plus, I convene and facilitate this group. So I'm more than happy to give them an advance heads up that this is something we'd like to do on a large scale. So for recruitment, that's one tool that I would encourage all of you to consider doing is connect with your local volunteer center. Use that as a way to get the word out to more people who might be interested potentially in doing a whole year of service. That might be what someone is looking for and they just aren't aware of it. The next group here is the regional capacity builders. This group, let's see, are any of you familiar with the Center for Nonprofit Excellence out of Charlottesville? They're probably the most likely one that anyone would have heard of. This group, their focus is more on providing training resources, especially for nonprofit staff and nonprofit boards, which can be very helpful. So this network is a little bit less about the kind of the upfront impact that a nonprofit is going to have and more about giving them the background resources that they need to operate. And again, when it comes to AmeriCorps programs, your best point of contact is going to be your program officer here at Serve Virginia. But for other things, for other nonprofit needs that you might have, one of the places that I would recommend that we would refer you out to is whoever your local capacity builder is going to be. So some of them operate a little bit more like funders, where they're looking to give out smaller grants or larger grants or bring in like whole cohorts of people to train, whether that's boards or executive directors. But a number of them also just are networks of peer professionals, networks of other people who are working in the nonprofit sector and want to be able to share resources and share advice with each other. We're working on getting this group of organizations listed on our website as well. But in the meantime, it's a group that I can refer people out to fairly easily. The next group of organizations, the next category here is 211 Virginia. This is less a group of organizations and more of a directory. So 211 Virginia is a directory for human service providing organizations in Virginia across, pretty much every need that you can imagine. And this is something our office also manages the contract for in Virginia. And we'd encourage all of you with the services you provide to get registered here, to list yourselves here so that people needing support are able to get directed to you. The last group I'm going to touch on is VA Engage. This is a network of community engagement offices and other professionals at Virginia's colleges who are in charge of overseeing the civic education going on at their university. So they're the people, teaching people about community involvement or elections or being engaged with democracy, that whole category of information and education. This is a network that's built around discussing that and sharing their efforts and information. And this is another great group to partner with for local recruitment. If you were to send our office something that you wanted sent out to colleges, this is the group I would send it to. So if you want to connect directly with any of these offices in the local level, that's kind of another avenue you can take to get directly connected with them. All right, any questions about any of these groups? And again, I'm speeding up a little bit here at the end so that we can take a shorter break before the next one. All right. So strategy 3, building a more robust resource and support infrastructure. So I'm going to start with 3 here is all of the aforementioned information that we've gone over, whether it was from Annalise's portion earlier or mine today. All of these resources are being housed on our new website, and that's where you're going to want to go to look for these. And some of this includes information about you all and your programs. And the rest is the general resources, a lot of those nonprofit support resources, which Annalise mentioned earlier. Now, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment and switch over to the website for a second, just to show you a couple of the places we've mentioned that are especially important to keep in mind, since I know sometimes you get to a new website and it's like, okay, where is everything? So we're gonna take care of that right now. All right, everyone should be able to see this. So this is the landing page. There's a lot of AmeriCorps really up front here. We want people to understand what it is. We want people to see this website and see AmeriCorps and also see volunteering and a lot of the different ways that we support Virginia's communities and really celebrate the impact of volunteers. So going up here, under Why Serve, this is where we're going to put our stories of service from our recognition ceremonies, kind of our way of inspiring people to serve, to get active. And this is eventually where a lot of the data from our community engagement index is going to be housed, where there's going to be information here on why people serve, why they get involved. Once we've got all that data written out, this is where we're going to format and put a lot of that. Now, under Get Involved, let's start with Join AmeriCorps. Get Involved, Join AmeriCorps is going to take people to a sub-page here, which has all the information about our AmeriCorps programs that you would need to find. So the different streams of service, the impact of AmeriCorps members, the location of current AmeriCorps sites, and all this information, obviously, stuff we'll need to update yearly, our different AmeriCorps state programs, and we have you all and your programs on here. Now, this is something we want to keep up. We want to keep up to date. We want to keep relevant information that you all would like to see. So what I would recommend, and I'll go ahead and pop this in the chat actually, is just take a look over this. And if we don't have you listed yet, we'll get you up there with updates. We've just launched this webpage and gotten access to it within the last 2 weeks, so thanks for your patience. But do review this information. If there are things that you think would be helpful for us to put here, please just tell us. Please let us know. This section is for you all. This is for you all to promote yourselves and list information that's going to be relevant for you. So make use of it in that way, and just let us know what you want to see up here, and we'll make it happen. Now, also under Get Involved and this Find Volunteer Opportunities, this is where you're going to find the listing of the volunteer centers in Virginia. So the Volunteer Center Network is a group that I convene and facilitate meetings for every month. And if you ever wanted to meet with them and talk with them, just let me know, and I'm happy to send you a meeting invite to learn more about what they do. But this group is generally focused around just sharing resources, enhancing volunteerism in general, kind of what collective strategies we can all push together towards, and make the best use of our time to accomplish together. So on here, you can see these dots on the map that give the actual office location, but a number of these do cover multiple counties and cities of Virginia. You can use this search tool by county to look for where you served, which area is served. So up here, for example, Volunteer Prince William, we've got the counties that serves. And scrolling all the way through here, you'll be able to see the different organizations. So again, I'd encourage you to take a minute and look through this. Find your local volunteer center and reach out to them, because that can be a really good resource for just general support when it comes to volunteer recruitment. And also, if you can get your AmeriCorps opportunities listed up there, it'll get out to a broader network than we might be able to reach ourselves, because those are people already looking for volunteer opportunities. Now, the pages that Annalise mentioned and showed some clips from earlier are housed under this Find Resources tab. So resources for partners. This partner toolkit is where you're going to be able to find, and again, a lot of this will be on Basecamp for you all and a little bit easier to access and download, just as a note. But some of the more general resources are going to be under here. So for example, a lot of our campaign resources, the social media posts, videos, logos, other tips on how to collaborate with us on social media. You can find all of these on here listed on the website. And again, that's under the Find Resources, Resources for Partners, and Partners Toolkit. Now, next part I'm going to go here is to nonprofit management. And these will link out to a number of the different training and learning opportunities in Virginia for nonprofits. Some of these do link to organizations like the Center for Nonprofit Excellence that are in Virginia. Others are national organizations that provide that kind of service and that kind of information. So I'd encourage you to look through here just to see what's already on here. And if there are resources that you're looking for that are missing and you don't know where to find them or anywhere else, or things that you think are specifically helpful that you've used in the past that you would want other people to have access to, again, send those our way and we'll get them up here. We want this to be a resource that's really broadly helpful for people in Virginia. And the last bit on here under the resources is some resources specifically about volunteer management. And again, these link out to a number of either Virginia-based or national organizations which provide that kind of support and that kind of guidance. Some of them will have free webinars. Some of them may have paid training opportunities, but that's all included on here. And it's definitely information that I'd recommend taking a look through. So